everyone, my name is Kat Savage and I'm a professional artist, clinical hypnotherapist and well-being expert working with those in the creative arts sector. In my line of work, I get to meet some amazing, colourful people, from actors to artists, people who live their lives by their own rules, fueled by passion and determination to bring their unique talents into the world. I wanted to discover what it took for people to leave the usual 9 to 5 and hop on a dream, to capture their bravest moments and share these meaningful conversations with you, so that together we can explore the ideas, emotions and moments that could potentially change our lives too. The Brave Moment podcast begins now, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, probably the bravest moment not only for my guests, but for the whole world. So let's keep talking, have some fun, and enjoy the show. This week on the show, we speak to session guitarist and lecturer Steve Down. Steve has worked with many global artists, including Joss Stone, Jeff Beck, Beverley Knight, Joselyn Brown, Nitin Sawhney, Lamar, Mica Paris, Incognito, Lack of Afro, and Keith Emerson. As a consequence, Steve has played some of the most prestigious venues in the world, most notably Wembley Stadium and the Royal Albert Hall. Co-running the successful Building and the Skyscrapers and having a huge passion for education, Steve also teaches online from his home studio, crafting lessons for YouTube and teaching in many schools and colleges around the southwest UK. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the insanely talented and very humble Steve Down. Steve Down, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kat.
How are you doing? How's your lockdown going?
Yeah, homeschooling.
Homeschooling, oh my goodness. Oh, are you surviving?
To be fair, it's mostly Sarah that's doing the homeschooling. I'm teaching from my room and doing sessions and teaching and stuff. And I think we're surviving. It's tricky though. It's really tricky. So yeah.
Oh, bless you.
I feel for all of the parents out there. But yeah, Sarah's doing the lion's share of it. So.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I can't even imagine. I mean, we're in Cornwall just with our dog, bless him, and he's a handful enough. So all credit to all of the parents out there who are having to deal with their children right now. Yeah. My heart goes out to you all, and well done for surviving.
Yeah.
Talking of childhood, I'm going to take you back to your childhood. Here we go.
Oh, wow.
So I want to know, because you are an awesome guitarist, when you were a child, did you know you would be a guitarist when you grew up?
Oh, wow. No. in a nutshell. I loved music. Yeah. Weirdly, it sounds so odd, but I actually wanted to be a poet.
Did you?
I loved books. And I wanted to be like a poet or a writer. And so I'd read T.S. Eliot, and I loved Dr. Seuss. I absolutely loved that stuff as a kid. And Roald Dahl and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all that kind of stuff as a kid, obviously as a bit of an older kid. But when I was, in single digits, definitely like Dr. Seuss. I was just obsessed. So yeah, so I was like, I want to be a Dr. Seuss. I want to write.
Well, maybe when those hands are all riddled with arthritis from all your great playing, you have to sit down and start composing that long lost poetry from your youth.
Yeah.
So was your childhood room just full of books, or were you what was your favorite thing in your room at the time?
This is such a cool question. I've got very I approach things very visually. So it was really nice to kind of just sit and think about my room for a little while and kind of take a little the Mind Palace tour and stuff around my room and everything. So I was just remembering the layout, and I remember it being kind of like a lovely L-shaped room. And me and my brother had bunk beds and stuff. And I had this my kind of shrine was like a tape deck in the corner. For the younger listeners, those just go and Google tape. Although I think tapes it's come back, isn't it? It's like a new thing.
It's so come back. I've seen kids with Walkmans on the street, and I'm like, hang on a minute, am I back in 1989 and 1990? What's happening here?
Yeah, it's mental. Yeah, but yeah, I had this tape deck in the corner, and I had like relatives who would send me tapes of like, you know, old bands and stuff like that, and so I just listened to lots and lots of very different music, and we'd make mixtapes and stuff. And there was a really interesting repeat of Guy Garvey, you know, from Elbow. He did like this amazing thing like a couple of years ago, and it was repeated on Radio 2 over the Christmas period on mixtapes and like the long lost art of a mixtape. And like you'd make that mixtape for your girlfriend or for your boyfriend, you know, and you'd obsess over like you get to the end of it and you'd find this kind of like, oh, I've got like a minute and 30 seconds, but I don't want to waste it. So I need to find a song that is a minute and 30 seconds before the tape runs out.
You're taking me right back into my childhood, just listening about yours. It's brilliant. I know exactly what you're talking about. And weirdly, I was doing a podcast yesterday and mentioned this exact song. It was called Return to Innocence by Enigma.
Oh, wow.
And I was obsessed with it. And I had to put it on every single mixtape that I had. And however, it would always be at the end because it was one of those like tracks that made you feel really uplifted, and it would always cut off right at the end. And I was gutted, absolutely gutted. And then the tape would just fall apart, wouldn't it? Like you try and rewind it, or it gets stuck in the machine, and then all hell would break loose. Yeah,
it getting stuck in the machine, or the head going, or something like that, and you'd hear that kind of kind of sound, you know, as the head's going on the machine.
So here you are in your childhood room, surrounded by tapes and music and wanting to be Dr. Seuss. But can you remember that time where you sort of moved away from poetry and stuff like that and really followed your heart with music? Yeah.
My journey with music started when I stole my sister's guitar.
Of course it did.
I still am the middle child. So, you know, I never got enough attention. She started to learn, I think she started to learn piano and then went on to guitar. And my sister's one of those really annoying people that's just good at everything. And then she just, you know, like put it down, and I was like, oh, I'm going to pick it up. And so started playing it. And my dad wanted to be a musician. He could play, he still can play. And so he would play, you know, Beatles songs on his guitar and everything, and would sing. And so it was really cool because he was there to kind of like nurture me with that stuff. But I think he kind of saw it was like, oh, you want to play these songs. You know, obviously my sister wasn't that interested in it. You know, I think music for me at that time, you know, I would definitely say I had quite a tricky childhood. And so music was an escape for me. And I think my family they encouraged that, because they could see I was having a tough time. And so they were just, you know, they were encouraging it as something that I could, you know, kind of focus on, and, you know, something that would be, you know, an escape for me.
That's really interesting to know, because I know that a lot of children who do have a tough time, be it at home or at school, they'll often turn to music, won't they, for sort of free therapy. Yeah. So can you remember that time, and how did music sort of encourage you internally to fight those battles?
I think it was just the kind of the contemplative thing. I think as a kid, you know, like especially in teenage years, I struggled with mental health issues, and, you know, it was that kind of it was meditative, and so it was kind of healing in a way. You know, to have that kind of time where it's like, okay, this is just my time to practice. You know, and, you know, if I was having a tough time at school, I could just go off to the music room. You know, and you know, it was a space where I could just be immersed and connected to something where I could just, you know, it was free expression. You know, so I think it was definitely a healing experience. I think that's definitely how it helped me.
I absolutely connect with you in that sense, and in the fact that the music room was also sort of like my sanctuary when I was at school. And I think it's something that happens to those people who at school are very bookwormy, or a little bit different, or just slightly outside of the box in some respects. And I just wonder how many music rooms around the world have saved a few teenage souls in their time. I'd say countless.
I really would. Same. I think, you know, the art room and the library and the music room, They're just places that they're like sacred spaces, aren't they, at school, I think?
They are absolutely sacred spaces, and they continue to be for us people that are slightly on the outside.
Yeah.
So in this space where you were starting to free yourself up and develop your skills in music, were you competitive? Did you enter any competitions or take exams, or were you more of a, I just want to get out there and start playing music type of guy?
I was kind of both. I did grades like earlier on because I think just because I just kind of wanted to challenge myself. And, my sister was just very good at everything. So I kind of wanted to compete. So I was like, okay, I need to take exams. And so, I did grades in guitar, and I would enter kind of like school competitions and form bands and do battle of the bands and that kind of stuff. But I was also out, just trying, as soon as I could, I was out, trying to play at people's birthday parties and stuff with bands. And I think my first gig was at the Cavern in Exeter, my first proper gig.
That's a good first gig.
Yeah, I don't remember which band I was playing with. It was people that were older than me. Definitely people that were older than me. And I think it was something to do with, do you remember that place in Gandy Street in Exeter it was called Martian Records?
Yes. Oh my goodness. That hasn't been there for a while.
I used to frequent that place so much. I think I got friendly with one of the guys behind the desk. He just chatted about music and stuff. And I can't remember what the band was, but he just asked me to come and play in this particular gig because they didn't have a guitarist. And I don't remember very much about the gig. I remember it was like really heavy rock.
That's so cool. Oh my goodness. I'm so jealous.
But yeah, it was that was my first, what I'd say my first proper gig. So
wow. Do you know my first proper gig? Oh my goodness, it was horrifying.
Really?
And I have to say this in a really tactile way, just in case any of the old members of the band are listening. Right. I was in a girl band called Sensei.
Wow.
And we modelled ourselves on Christina Aguilera, of course. And our first gig was in Plymouth City Centre for some kind of like musical talent day. And in this city, there was about 4 or 5 people watching. We looked horrifying, sounded even worse. And needless to say, our career as a girl band didn't very last long. It was raining as well. It was just such a Debbie Downer day. To be cool like you, Steve, to be cool.
I totally was not cool. I was definitely not cool at school. Like, very, very far from it.
Wow. So there you are, doing probably one of the coolest gigs of all time. Anyone that knows Exeter and the Cavern knows that it's the place to be if you're into rock music. But can you remember who inspired you when you were younger? Were you into rock music at the time, or were you more eclectic or alternative?
I was definitely eclectic. And that, like I said, people would send me, my family members would send me tapes and stuff. But my dad was also extremely eclectic as well. When he saw that I was getting into music and kind of, getting a bit of a passion for it, he gave me a few albums. And he gave me it was just a really random selection. But at the time it seemed like a random selection. Now it kind of seems very calculated. But he gave me this record by a band called Steely Dan called Pretzel Logic, and then Abbey Road by the Beatles, Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin, and then a recording of Vaughan Williams' Lark Ascending. And I was just listening to all of this music going, this is amazing. And now I can kind of see, looking back, he's he's trying to give me a bit of a taste of, of the extremes in music, I guess. I don't think he gave me music from anywhere outside of the West, which kind of frustrates me a little bit now. Couldn't you have given me something from South Africa or from, Taiwan or something? That would have been amazing. But yeah, I was definitely eclectic.
What he did give you, oh my goodness, aren't you lucky? I was subjected to, let me have a think, Supertramp.
Supertramp.
That was big in our household. Foreigner, Peter Gabriel, all of those
amazing.
Kind of guys.
That Peter Gabriel, so, amazing.
Peter Gabriel and Dad's crush, and he won't mind me saying this, Kate Bush.
Yeah. Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush kind of go really well together, I think. like those.
They are hand in hand, aren't they? They're twin flames in music.
Yeah.
So who inspires you now? Who do you take your influence, well, not influence, but who encourages you to produce your own sound?
Oh gosh, I mean, that's such a difficult question, because I think I take a lot of inspiration from everyone. I think I find it really difficult to say, that this is like an overarching inspiration. It's more kind of like lots and lots of different things. Like I've got really into kind of stuff like chill hops kind of stuff.
Ooh.
I think I've got very into this kind of like meditative kind of contemplative music. There's a great guy out there called No Spirit. And the music that he creates is so calming and it's amazing. But it's got this really cool groove underneath. And if you kind of listen really deeply, it's like, oh, this is amazing. This is so cool. People like Gunga as well. They've just got this certain sound to it, which has just got such a depth to it. And I think that's the kind of thing. It's like any music that has got a real depth to it is something that kind of really inspires me. Something that's kind of almost telling a story, because I think that's one thing that I really connect with in music, and one thing that I intentionally look for is a story. If the song or the piece of music can tell some kind of story or has a story behind it, then that's me. I'm hooked.
I mean, I can totally relate to that. Being a singer, I'm always looking for that story that's being told lyrically, and it just pleases me to hear that kind of goes through every single instrument, because and I know that you'll know this, being that you teach guitar as well as play it out there in the world, that getting younger people to understand that the story is a really, really crucial part of the playing, isn't it? If you don't have the story, it just falls apart in your fingertips.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's story and melody. I think that's the thing. It's like, one of the things that I get asked an awful lot, in guitar when I'm teaching is, how to play like this and how to play fast and, what good technique is and everything, and, how to play jazz and that kind of thing. And it's like the immediate thing is like melody. It's like always go to the melody, like if you want to learn how to play jazz, learn songs. Like just learn the heads, learn the melodies. It's all in there, and you can take it from there. And I think that and the story is in the melody as well. There's so much that you can get from a melody.
Can you remember the first song that you heard that story within?
Wow. Yes.
Talk to us about it.
It's one of my favorite pieces of music. It's by the Divine Comedy. Do you remember the Divine Comedy?
I love the Divine Comedy.
Yeah,
yes.
Pursuit of Happiness. It's that song. Well, I mean, it is a song. It's just like it's difficult to describe exactly what it is. But Neil Hannon is just he's just such an amazing composer, and like you've got these kind of bookended bits of story lyrically. And then in the middle, the music just takes you on a journey, and it's amazing. The orchestration in it is just, you can tell that the way that he's crafted it, that he's listened to, an awful lot of different classical composers and jazz composers as well, and pop song crafters. I don't think that's a word, but we'll go with it.
It is now.
But I think you can just tell that he's listened to masters in order to how to get that kind of sound. And it's such a kind of romantic symphonic sound, but it does just convey a story. And I think, even classical composers, you can, there was an amazing piece of music I listened to the other day by Schumann that, has these kind of two violins, and it was a great thing to listen to on Valentine's Day, because it was like the perfect representation of two people, and like sometimes they're together and they're talking to each other, and sometimes they're talking, that they're turned away from each other, and the melody is in divergence rather than convergence, and sometimes they're just talking to the orchestra. And it's like you listen to it and you're just like, he's trying to tell a story. And Schumann struggled an awful lot with mental health issues. And sometimes his desperation and his melancholy all comes out in the music, and you can kind of hear that. There's definitely a story you can hear in music. If you listen for it, it's there. It's
so lovely to hear you talk about story. I'm a big fan of just story in general, being that we are human, and our whole world is completed with story. In fact, I read a really good book recently called The Science of Story by Will Storr.
Wow.
Have you come across it?
I haven't, no.
Oh my goodness. Well,
I need to write that down.
I recommend that book to you. Yes. Yeah, definitely read it. You would absolutely love it. Oh my goodness. So here you are, a very meditative, contemplative creator of your own music. But what drives you to create? Do you have like a set routine that you abide by, or a ritual? What sort of motivates you to create?
I think the thing that I constantly try and do is to just kind of try and improve myself. And it's one thing that I have to keep telling myself. And it's a struggle to kind of just, like try and, I always keep a practice diary, a written practice diary, and I'll record myself and then won't listen to it intentionally until like 3 weeks later. And then I can go back to it and go, okay, so you have improved. Something has improved, something has changed. I think that's the thing that motivates me to kind of practice, is that self-improvement. I do have to kind of keep a bit of a routine. I have kind of like a loose practice diary, a loose practice schedule, and, which is kind of timed out, but it's not really, really strict, because I think you have to leave a certain, realm for kind of being creative. But then, you have to be realistic in life as well. Like the thing for me is that, I have a family. I can't, practice for 6 hours a day anymore. so I have to kind of have some kind of, routine where I'm like, okay, what needs to get done? What do I need to improve on? And so I'll actually sit down on a Sunday evening sometimes and actually map out, what do I want to focus on this week? Maybe I won't meet it, but it's having that aim that, that motivates me to get in the practice room.
And also just making that space for yourself, isn't it? And knowing that regardless of what happens during your week, however chaotic it is, you have that space that you've promised yourself in a way.
Oh gosh, yeah.
To have a playground.
It is, isn't it?
To go to.
It's the adult playground, isn't it? Yeah.
The adult playground. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So obviously, you are a professional guitarist, and I know that a lot of people who play an instrument will be wondering whether or not they can make a career out of their playing. Would you be so kind as to sort of give us some of your fantastic highlights in your career to inspire people to keep going?
I think my big highlight was playing the Royal Albert Hall and Wembley Stadium in one weekend. That was like,
oh my God, in one weekend?
I think it was like Saturday and Sunday. And I think that was like, I was so overwhelmed. And that I think that was my absolute, like one of my career highlights, for kind of like, like bucket list kind of things. But I think going to different countries and playing in different countries, I was lucky enough to be on tour with Joselyn and on her Total World Tour. And we went to some amazing countries like Bhutan and Lesotho, and I think those are like my two highlights from that tour. Is those two places, and getting to kind of share music with people in different countries, and getting to experience those other different countries as well. And it's difficult to kind of say whether that was better than Albert Hall and Wembley Stadium, in one weekend, because I think there's something about connecting with other people. And when you play in Wembley Stadium, it's like playing in 900 aircraft hangars, like all put together. You can't see a single person, and it's difficult to kind of connect with anyone in particular. So.
Oh, I'm just absolutely in awe of everything that you're talking about. I want to know what did it feel like stepping out on the stage in Wembley? Because I mean that is every musician's dream, isn't it? Can you remember how your heart was beating? Can you remember what it smelled like? What can you remember from that experience?
Oh yeah, massively anxiety inducing. Sorry, words, Steve. Massively anxiety inducing. I think having a good kind of warm-up routine before going on stage is really important, because I don't think I would have survived it if I hadn't had that. I think I would have just gone, like rabbit in the headlights. The anxiety was made, all the more intense by the fact that I was stood next to Jeff Beck. So I was just kind of like staring at him, and I could just kind of remember feeling like, this isn't real. Like, and kind of like feelings like, I don't deserve to be here. I'm not a guitarist, and, I'm not experienced enough. All that kind of feelings kind of come into you, but also like being overwhelmed by the amount of like cameras flashing. I can remember seeing that and kind of, being, really kind of like overwhelmed by that. It felt like I just wanted to run across the pitch. I was that kind of like, there's that kind of excitement that made me just kind of, want to go for a run, basically.
I can't even imagine what it must have been like at the end of that weekend. It must have felt like you lived like 10 years in 48 hours.
It did. And you know what? The weirdest thing is that, have you ever seen that movie Soul? The Pixar movie.
I love that movie. Yes.
So it's so weird because, like, I mean, this, I'm in no way ungrateful for the experience because it was an amazing experience. And, but I did feel kind of like a little bit like he felt when he got the gig that he really wanted. You just kind of have this feeling of like, oh, what now? And, I can't remember what he said. Oh, I thought it would feel different. I think Lacan, who he kind of had this whole idea of a sacred object. And he said, you kind of hold these things up as sacred objects that you think that if you get them, you'll become different as a person. And so you kind of like go, oh, okay, I'm going to hold that so tightly and I'm going to aim for that. And then, as soon as you get it, you're like, okay, well, what now? It's like the dog that caught the car, And like I said, it's an amazing experience. I don't want to sound like I'm really ungrateful for the experience because I'm very grateful for it. But I did feel like on the drive on the way home, I was just like kind of feeling like, oh, I thought I would feel different,
like you'd be changed.
Yeah, like I'd be changed.
In some way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I'd be changed. Yeah, like I'd be a different person.
Do you know what? I can absolutely relate to that. And obviously, the Brave Moment podcast was born out of one of those experiences in particular.
Oh, really?
And I read a book called The Expectation Hangover, which is a fantastic book. Again, being bookwormy, I can talk to you about these things. And I had that feeling too. I came back from this big life experience and went, oh my goodness, what now? And you kind of have this expectation hangover. So you're like, oh, okay, I've achieved that now. And it's almost like a weirdly mild depression for a little bit, isn't it? You're just like, well, I thought this would change me. I thought, once I'd done this, I'd feel a certain way and you don't. And then you have to quickly find something else to sort of set your focus on, set your goals on in order to get out of that almost slump that you feel after you've achieved something as big as that. Did you find that you had that slump as well? Or was it just straight in?
Yeah, definitely. Because I was back in teaching in a primary school on Monday morning. So, I was, it was kind of like, it felt surreal. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love teaching, but it was just completely different from that. And I did feel kind of like, like you said, that describes it perfectly, the expectation hangover. But I think it is because you build yourself up so much to those points and you kind of think, I'm going to be different. I definitely say read Lacan. He was like a contemporary of Freud. And some of the things that he said on that particular subject is amazing.
It's weird, isn't it? It's like you don't fit into your normal life anymore.
Yeah. And I think also like in the music industry as well, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to achieve all the time. So once you've done that, you kind of, the immediate thing that I felt was like, I obviously now need to keep this up. So I need to be playing Wembley Stadium every weekend, and you consistently move the goalposts. And I think sometimes in an unhealthy way, it's definitely, it's really good to have goals in your life. But I think sometimes you can get so unhealthy about it. And that's why, Lacan meant about the sacred object is that, you've got to be really healthy with having those goals, because otherwise you'll end up just moving the goalposts and you'll constantly be living in this state of lack. And, like, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't have these gigs. And therefore that equals that I'm not good enough,
The compare and despair complex.
Yes, yeah.
So that brings me neatly onto my next question, which is, what do you think it takes to become a success in the music world? And what do you define as personal success? Yeah,
it's a difficult one, isn't it? Defining success. Yeah. I don't think I really define it necessarily. I don't know, shoot me down for saying this, but I think sometimes in some ways we need to transcend having a specific definition of success. I think you kind of have to find out what it means to you. And like I said, it's great to have goals. Don't make it into the sacred object. And it depends how you're defining it. And for me, the way that I define it is through connection. It's kind of I found that it's being connected with an audience. The best gigs that I can remember is when, the audience is responding. And, if that's in a tiny little room with 50 people, I'm going to remember that more than remember that more than than Wembley Stadium. I can remember a small room more than I can remember that giant gig.
It's so interesting that you say that. We had a guest on recently who I know you know, Sestra, aka
listen to that. It's amazing.
And and she said the same thing. She's another musician that's played big gigs like the Royal Albert Hall. And I asked her, what would be your perfect gig? And she said what you've just said. It would be a gig with a room full of her friends, and that's it. Just something really, really intimate. And it didn't matter where it was. All that mattered was that her friends were there. And I think that's a really interesting look, because so many people, especially when they're young, they think that success is the Wembley gig,
yes,
don't they? That's what they're aiming for. But when you start to gig and you realise that actually the things that are really important is just having maybe one person sing a song back at you, or one person clapping or dancing in front of you that is really connecting with you, and you can't quite get that, can you, with the bigger gigs?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember the gig that we did out in Lesotho with Joss. Like, I think that's gone down as like one of my favorite gigs, because there was no venue there. I remember it kind of like on a hillside somewhere with this group of school children from, I think it was like a Catholic school, I think, or something like that. And so they kind of just watched us play, and there was no equipment, so I was just sat there with an acoustic guitar, and Joss was singing into thin air. And it was just an amazing experience, because they loved it. And then we were getting packed up to kind of leave, and they did a gig for us, and they sang some songs. And I was like, oh my word, this is amazing. Like, and so I think things like that, stick in your mind more when you can make a connection with the audience in some way.
And a massive shout out to Joss at the moment, because I know she's just given birth to a beautiful baby girl. So big shout out and love to that woman. She's incredible, not only as a person, but as a musician. So it's lovely to have you mention her on the show. So was there ever a point where you thought about quitting? And if so, what changed your mind?
There's been many moments where I've thought about quitting, not to take it in a dark direction, but most of them have kind of, been as a result of me doubting myself and kind of having to constantly wrestle with that. And, I had it when I was at university as well. I got into my first year and I was like, I can't do this. And, tried to leave. And it's always been, kind of friends that have turned me around. In my career as well, since leaving university, there have been, quite a few points where I've kind of gone, I don't think I'm good enough, or, I've got, imposter syndrome, where I'm just like, I don't feel like, like at some point someone's going to find me out and realize that, I don't know anything. and, I'm going to be, it's going to be like plastered everywhere. Steve Down doesn't know anything. It's like, you know nothing, Steve Down. Like,
you know nothing, Jon Snow.
And I think that kind of that's been the points where I've kind of wanted to go. I can't do this. And worried so much about making a mistake on a gig and stuff, and all of that time is just wasted time. But they always say that if you worry, you're just making trouble for yourself twice, aren't you? Really? Because there's just no point in it. How in those moments where you've thought, imposter syndrome, or you want to give up, what do you say to yourself to get yourself back in check? It's something that I've learned from actually just like therapy later in life is like kind of putting thoughts on trial. That whole idea of CBT is amazing. CBT is just incredible. And I think it's been life-changing for me. Like putting thoughts on trial and like having a piece of paper next to you. I suck at guitar. What's the evidence for this? And, has anyone actually ever said that, and, if it's true, then what are the consequences of that? And it's like, I never get to the end. I never get to like, if it's true, because it's usually not true. I've usually lied to myself some way along the line. So I think, doing stuff like that is really, really helpful for me. And then also just like, finding really honest friends as well. I've got a few very honest friends who'll, tell me if, I've messed up, or, like extrapolating and kind of spiraling, which is something that you kind of do when you've got self-doubt. You just end up spiraling. And so, CBT and friends, definitely.
So how have you found that your music or this type of work has affected your personal life, other than obviously creeping in at 4 a.m? I'd
say, being in music is quite tough on your personal life. It's very antisocial hours. And, the tiredness of, being on tour as well, it is draining. The traveling is draining. But lots of people just think you're on holiday.
Yeah. Living the dream, not.
Yeah. But, I think, when you've traveled and you've hopped time zones, I think I hold the record in the band for the longest travel day, which I think was like 58 hours, I think.
Oh my goodness, Steve Down. That's ridiculous.
Something like that. And that was going from I think we were in the Dutch Antilles, going back to London. I can't remember how many times I changed planes, but it was crazy. But yeah, it's totally draining on you. And, being away from home an awful lot, being away from the kids and that whole kind of thing of once you're home, and then you've got 2 weeks maybe before the next tour starts, and then weekends being taken out by gigs and stuff. But the beauty of it is that if you are kind of astute with your timetabling and you're organized, it is quite flexible. If you feel overwhelmed, there is the option of just saying no, to a gig and just going, do you know what? I need to spend some time at home with the family. And, that's really, because at the end of the day, once the tour's finished, you've got to come home. I think it's really important to make sure that, whether you're gigging or touring, that you're always maintaining that kind of connection with home. It's a very difficult kind of juggling act. Yeah. So, I mean, what do you do to relax and switch off from all of it? I think I'm an inquirer. I'm always not the trashy magazine. I'm just always reading, listening to podcasts. That's the kind of thing that kind of switches me off. I think that's kind of like my way of kind of like unwinding.
What are you reading at the moment, out of interest?
Oh gosh, I've got a couple of. I've always got a few books on the go.
Same. Oh my god, let's compare.
There's one of them is called Year of Wonder, which is it's written by Clemency Burton Hill. That's it, Clemency Burton Hill. It's a presenter from Radio 3. It's basically a piece of classical music every single day, and then there's like a little kind of paragraph about a piece of classical music. It's really good to have this kind of like little routine-y thing. And I'm a bit OCD anyway, so like things like that really, that are in chronological order really appeal to me. The other book that I've got on the go is by a writer called Richard Rohr, and it's called The Wisdom Pattern.
Ooh, tell me more.
It's a Christian book, but it's very kind of different from a lot of kind of Christian books that you'd find out there. And Richard Rohr is kind of very controversial character, should we say, in the Christian world.
Excellent.
Which is kind of why I'm drawn to it.
That doesn't sound like you.
And it's this thing that he's got in there. He calls it the cosmic egg, and it's basically about, he's got this whole kind of thing which he calls like transcend and include, and he's all about inclusion. And the whole kind of like premise of the book is this thing that he calls the cosmic egg. And it's all about story, and again, that's why I'm kind of attached to it. And so it's this whole thing of my story, our story, and then these stories. So you kind of have to have a healthy relationship with all three in order to kind of function well. If you kind of get trapped in my story, and that's just about me and my private life and my small kind of, like searching for significance through power and prestige and possessions and all that kind of stuff, that's quite unhealthy.
It sounds like a fantastic book, and leads me very nicely onto my next question for you, actually. So you are a man of faith, and I want to know, how does that inspire you or influence you, and is that a personal space for you, or is that something that comes through when you play your music?
I'd like to think that it comes through when I play music. I think that depends on the listener, doesn't it? But the things that kind of, the way it kind of connects up is again, like within like the early church, they're actually called mystics. They were all about transcendence and connection. And, even within, the Bible, St. Paul talks about unity and, bringing groups together, different groups together, whatever practices, ethnicities, observances you've got, bringing all of that together as one, but still remaining yourself. It's more, kind of about acceptance. And the amount of times that word is used, unity and acceptance and, together and us and that kind of thing. I think that really influences me in my music, because I again, it's just about connection. It's just about connecting with people, and that whole idea of being in a room with lots and lots of of different people from very different walks of life, all of that goes away for 90 seconds, for 90 minutes, you know.
Do you know, it's so interesting you should say that, because obviously when you play, you are so eclectic with what you can bring to the table. And I've seen you play everything from really complex jazz with things like the Swiss up to, you know, contemporary pop. So it's really, really, when you say, you know, you try to bring that depth and that understanding of music with you to the table, it's really, really apparent when you play. What's your favorite genre? That's all right, mate. What's your favorite genre to play?
I'm not sure I have one, you know. Like, I love kind of just gleaning from different genres, you know. I do have a really big love of jazz, but I also, like, you know, that I think I see how that influences, you know, how it influenced soul music through gospel music into soul and R&B. And, you know, so I connect with that as well. You know, I think you can just see, like, nothing exists in a vacuum in music. And I think I always see that through everything. Everything's always got some kind of influence, which is why I'm kind of just obsessed with, like, seeing that and kind of going, oh, look, they're referencing something here, which is obviously something they've listened to, which doesn't sit within the genre that, you know, record stores have kind of like have sat them in, you know. And so that's the kind of, I think that's just the way that I think. And so I just don't really have like a genre that I kind of go, you know, this is the music that I'm always going to listen to. I think I just have a love of song and music that connects with me on an emotional level. I was doing like a little study on a piece of music called Milestones, and the solo that the sax player was playing quoted Fascinating Rhythm by Gershwin.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, so he's listening to Gershwin, you know, and the way that he was structuring it was kind of like the way that, you know, Beethoven structured his Fifth Symphony. And it was like, this person's got a real story behind them as a musician. And it just so happened that they were a music teacher.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like, okay, so that figures, you know, like, and I think if you just listen to music on a surface level, I think you're missing so much. I think, you know, sometimes it's really good to kind of just listen really, really kind of contemplatively and deeply. In music, you've got this whole idea of like negative space, just like you have in art, where, you know, like the space actually means, you know, more. Like, you know, Miles Davis talked an awful lot about how, you know, the music is actually in the space sometimes. You know, like it's about the spaces in between the notes. That's what makes the music. And we, you know, we hear that all of the time, you know, when you know, you've got like a drop, you know, in a piece of music, you know, that kind of, it gives you a certain kind of level of anxiety. And then as soon as it's released, you know, and the music comes back in, you know, all of a sudden it's like, you know, you get, you know, a hit of dopamine.
Oh my goodness. I absolutely agree with that. In very many ways. I'm thinking, just as you're saying that, I was thinking, you know, about those songs where space is as important as the notes. And one of my favorite songs is by Holly Cole, Nat King Cole's daughter, and it's called Losing My Mind. And it's so beautifully played. But in contrast to that, any song by Snarky Puppy, and I'm all over that. I love them. If you haven't checked them out, people, please go and check them out. And they fill the space, but then they do know when to leave it, and therefore you do get that tension and release all the way through, and lots of different color bursts as they play, which I really appreciate. Oh my goodness.
I mean, even Snarky Puppy, sorry to go on another tangent, but like that, there's an album by them. I think it's, I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing the name right, but I think it's called Silver or Sylvia. I can't remember what the name of the album is, but it was basically done with the Metropole Orchestra, and so they've got an orchestra as well as, you know, the giant band that is Snarky Puppy. And some of the music on it, I mean, you know, the coming together of these two kind of like, I wouldn't say they're necessarily different traditions in music, but they just approach music differently. And you know, the way, the sound that they get together, you can hear all of the different influences, but it's all kind of mingling in together. And there's this one piece called Gretel that's on the end of it, which is just, oh my word.
It's insane.
Like, you listen to it. I always think of like there was a Brian Cox documentary that was like about, you know, like the like cosmology. I don't know if that's the right word, actually. Sorry, but it was about like the forming of planets, and you know, so all of these rocks were smashing together and stuff. And I was like listening to that music, and I was going, "This is what that would sound like if it were music." You know, like, you know, and you've got that big drop, you know, right at the end, you know, where it stops, and that gap, you know, that's the music. Without that drop, that, you know, that it wouldn't have the same impact.
It's the cliffhanger, isn't it? So, you're just there holding your breath, waiting for the next second.
Yeah.
So what song do you have to sing along to when you hear it?
I love that question. Hip to be Square by Huey Lewis and the News.
Oh my goodness. Do you do the dance moves though? Do you have some swish dab moves going on now?
If there's no one around. It's a good job we're not on Zoom, because like, otherwise I'd be scared that you're going to tell me to do it.
Okay, so I'm going to drop you into some really strange, wacky questions now. So
sure.
If your life was a movie, what would 3 of the songs be on the soundtrack?
Oh, difficult. Can I have 10?
You'll have to create that album at some point.
I think I think one of them is definitely, it's a song called, or a piece of music called Chorus by Philip Glass. I absolutely love that piece of music. It's kind of referred to as minimalist, although he doesn't refer to himself as a minimalist composer. He wrote it thinking about compassion. And so it's meant to give you kind of feelings of peace and serenity and that kind of thing. It's an absolutely beautiful piece of music. If that will definitely be on the soundtrack somewhere. I think Pursuit of Happiness by Divine Comedy would be on there somewhere. You know, it's really difficult thinking about a third one, because I think probably something like Springsville by Miles Davis. Like that's like, I love that.
This is going to be a really good album.
I've got there's so many more, like Hip to be Square and like Holocene by Bon Iver, and there's an amazing band called The Brilliants, which has got a song called Mercy, which is about like his struggle with all of the contradictions of Christianity.
Wow.
And you know how you go about doing life when you've got all of these contradictions going on, and you know, and it's like you listen to the song, you're like, this just kind of like musically embodies all that doesn't make sense. So
I'm so checking out that piece of music when this is finished, because that sounds insanely brilliant. By The Brilliants.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could know the absolute and total truth to one question, what would it be?
Why did George Lucas make The Phantom Menace?
Oh my goodness, that's the best answer I think I've ever had. That's awesome. Yes, why? Why?
On a serious note, I think if I could know the truth to something, it would be kind of like what the use of our ego is. I think, because I think we all kind of like we all really struggle with that on a daily basis, and like you know, so I think that would be like the I'd love to know why we have that, what use it is.
You can understand why some artists actually have like an alter ego that they take onto stage, because dealing with your own would just crush you, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the most interesting thing you've read or seen recently?
There was a thing that I've got really into gardening, and so I kind of like was trying to understand like this whole idea of like seed germination and what that means, and trying to remember like all my school days of science classes and that kind of thing. And I stumbled upon this. It was Brian Cox again, and he was basically talking about when does a strawberry die, and it was like this whole thing of like honestly, it runs all the way through the series, The Infinite Monkey Cage, and it's hilarious. And he was just talking about, you know, like what is the actual definition of, you know, what is alive? You know, what the definition of the word alive. You know, it's really complex in biology, and biology has actually struggled to come up with textbook definitions of what it means to be alive. You know, is it, you know, it metabolizes, or does it need to, you know, have a means to reproduce? Does it process information? Would a computer be alive if it was conscious? You know, all stuff like that. And you're like, I've just gone down a rabbit warren of stuff. But like the idea of like the strawberry, he uses this kind of thing of with the strawberry, where it's like, well, at what point does it die? At what point would you say, you know, it's gone? It's no longer a strawberry, and it's now just compost, you know?
That's a thinker. Oh my goodness. You're going to send so many people into a spiral after they hear this. It'll be hilarious.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Oh my goodness, great. So I'm going to throw this question at you then, because I think it's kind of nice to follow on from what you've just said. If you could meet your 100-year-old self, who clearly hasn't died, what do you think he'd say to you?
I think he'd say, you think too much.
I think he would be right.
I think he'd say, like, stop overanalyzing and get on with it. I think I spend so much time worrying about stuff, or like kind of just thinking, that I'm just kind of like, it's like, oh, what was I doing?
He sounds like a decent chap. He knows what he's talking about. I can tell. So coming a little bit back to because we are coming to the end of the podcast. So sadly, I've so enjoyed hearing your voice. It's been too long, my friend.
Oh, you too.
But just to those people who maybe aren't at the point in their life where they're gardening or creeping around trying to keep their kids asleep, and are actually just thinking on embarking on a career as a guitarist, what advice or tips would you give them in starting out?
Yeah, I think this is such a good question, and I think I was talking a little bit about touring earlier, and I didn't want to make that sound really difficult, because I think just having a good approach to things, if you have a good approach to things and you don't just get kind of swept along with the moment, when you're doing your diary, I think is that's a really important thing. So I didn't want to make it sound like it was really horrible, because it actually is. It's so amazing when you can go out and play music to people. I think to people starting out, I think the thing to think about is, kind of try all different types of music. Don't I think genres were something invented by by record stores and record companies, to kind of, put people in pigeonholes and stuff. And I think you can very easily, as a musician trying to start out, I think you can kind of go, oh, I'm just going to be jazz, or I'm just going to be rock. And I think kind of just having an openness to music, I think that's really, really good. I think that's such a great approach to music. And I think just, making sure that you can play, if you're wanting to be a session guitarist, that is, I think, play an awful lot of different styles of music is really useful. And so, maybe you might not like that music, but that doesn't mean that it's terrible. And, so I'll learn to play it to the best of my ability. I won't kind of go, I don't like this piece of music, so I'm just going to botch it. I'm going to, kind of like part learn it or whatever. But I think also like non-comparison as well. That's another thing, I think, for guitarists, like trying to not compare yourself to other people and realize that you're on your own journey and everyone's journey looks different. And to not, fall into the trap of kind of going, I'm not good enough because I can't do what next person can do. Because as soon as you do that, it's a never ending cycle. You kind of like, okay, well, now I can do what the person I compared myself to did, but now I found someone else. And, social media is really, because you can find so many people that are, a million times better than you, it's endless, but I think everyone brings something different to the table. And so I think, like the question of what is better is a really good question, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone is unique in the way that they bring what they bring to music. You've got some guitarists that, they'll play 3 or 4 notes and you're absolutely hooked. And the timing is so accurate that it just grabs the listener. And that leads them to kind of go, this is the most amazing guitarist in the world, And it's like, well, all they played was 4 notes. And it's like, yeah, exactly. All they played was 4 notes, And
they were the best 4 notes I've ever heard.
Exactly. There's so many songs that have pickups with 3 or 4 notes. And it's like, you play that wrong and you ruin the song.
Yeah.
How many people, would want to hear a million notes at the beginning of that tune instead of wah, 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 wah,
Beautifully demonstrated, I must say. Someone out there will have loved those 4 notes.
Yeah. I'm not a singer, let's just say that.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one more question before we do the quick fire question round.
Oh.
And obviously this is called the brave moment. So I would love to know what you consider to be your bravest moment, whether that be something physical, spiritual, or mental.
I'm a firm believer that life is lived forwards and understood backwards. So I think I don't think I would have been thinking that I was brave at the time. I think your last podcast guest said this as well, like, and it's so right. It's like, you don't really think about it at the time. You just kind of do it. But then when you think backwards, you're kind of like, oh, wow, that was a complete change in how I would possibly have approached that, a year before or whatever, And I think the thing for me is like, I think it's choosing to have lots and lots of different streams of income in music, and not kind of, just doing one thing. And I probably should have said that earlier as advice for kind of like aspiring guitarists who are thinking about jumping into the industry, because I think, again, with social media and with, there's a certain stigma in the music industry, which is actually starting to come to an end, thank God, that, things like teaching, or like music therapy, for example, and stuff like that, that's not, being a musician. That's being a teacher, or that's being a therapist. It's like, no, that's being a musician. Yeah. And you can do, lots and lots of different things, and that's totally fine. And I think sometimes when it gets referred to as like, oh, that's just your bread and butter money, or that's like a dead end job or whatever, but the real thing is playing on stage. It's like, no, all of it is,
That's what being creative is, isn't it? To be creative, you're finding solutions, and you're finding different accesses and stimuli for that creativity. And I think, for those people that have that stigma, especially those who can't teach people, to be in that position where you're seeing someone light up about something that you're sharing with them, that is one of the most creative, synergistic moments, isn't it? And it's so beautiful to witness that and be a part of that.
Yeah. Choosing to kind of teach and choosing to not care about what anyone else thought about me teaching. Because I've had so many comments like, about, do you get fed up of teaching and, that kind of thing. And it is draining at times, but choosing to have lots of different strains of income to teach, as well as gigging and recording and stuff as well. I think that was like my bravest moment, but it was difficult to kind of think of what my absolute bravest moment was, because there was another one as well of like, choosing not to live in London, for example, was one. When I finished university, all of my friends moved to London.
Do you know, and that's something I can absolutely relate to, because myself and my husband, Tim, who's the drummer in our band, we were up in London doing that thing, and I was just homesick. And as a consequence, I felt inhibited creatively as opposed to expressive. And as soon as I gave myself that space, and even though everything in your mind goes, no, I must be there in order to be successful, when we're talking about that theme of success, it just goes to show that actually, if you're in a safe space, or a space that you consider a place to breathe, or a place to grow, then absolutely you get that success follow you, whether that's an emotional success that you've survived something, or whether that's an actual, physical success.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So taking you into the final throes of this deep and wonderful wonderland that you've taken us into today, I'm going to give you your quick fire round.
Do you know the answers to these questions, and do I win something?
You win my respect if you survive it. Okay, so I want you to answer as quickly as you can and as much as you can without thinking too hard on the subject. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Steve Down, here is a quick fire section. Okay, favourite guitar?
My Nash Telecaster.
Your hero?
Richard Raw.
Best friend at school?
Liam Thompson.
Favourite motivational song?
Stop Shut Up by Bernhoft.
Oh, nice. Epic fail?
The inability to put a guitar strap on in between songs.
That's kind of a crucial one, isn't it, for a guitarist? Last thing you played?
Don't judge me. Do you want to build a snowman?
What's so funny is that me and Tim watched Frozen 2 like about 2 nights ago, and I was just like all over that. Anyway, no judgment here. If you could have any other talent, what would it be?
I think I'd want to be a philosopher.
I think you already are. I think maybe singer might be up there somewhere. Earlier demonstration. Favourite book?
The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett.
Good choice. Favourite film?
Back to the Future. One.
Favourite...
Part one.
Nice. Not the rubbish one in between. No, okay. Favourite trait in human beings?
Compassion and creativity. Oh, that's 2, isn't it?
That's okay. I'll allow it. Worst trait in human beings?
Arrogance.
Favorite self-attribute?
Inquiry, thinking deeply.
Nice. Worst self-attribute?
Thinking deeply.
Tea or coffee?
Oh, definitely coffee.
Favorite country?
Bhutan.
What makes you laugh?
My son.
Oh, that's awesome.
Bo makes me laugh.
What has he done recently that made you really laugh out loud?
Oh, it's I don't know. I think it's just his. I think he tells jokes. He tries to tell knock jokes, and he doesn't. He's 3, so he doesn't get the concept of a knock joke. So he'll be like knock, and you're like, who's there? And he'll be like, bowl. And you're like, bowl who? And he's like, bowl of hoops. And obviously you have to laugh, you know.
Of course. I mean, how could you not? That's awesome. Maybe he's the true philosopher amongst us all. Okay, carrying on. Annoying habit.
Leaving the lights on and forgetting about them.
Ooh, naughty. Favorite animal.
Owl.
Favorite food.
Risotto.
Oh, nice. Best piece of advice you ever received.
Ooh. I think leaving space in music. My guitar teacher always said, and it's stayed with me, I'm a sucker for space. And I always remember that.
Maybe that's why you like Brian Cox so much as well. It sort of goes 2 ways. Okay, your final question is a weird thing that you do.
When I find an artist that I really like, I always listen to their music in chronological order. So if there's a new album, I can't listen to it until I've listened to all of their material beforehand. So...
Wow.
It's actually really annoying because I'm like, I don't get the satisfaction if I haven't listened to their first album. Like,
do you specifically go online and try and find like that really rubbish B-side song that didn't get released until like 10 years ago,
yes,
but was actually released like 50 years ago?
Yes.
Oh my God, I love that. That is weird, but I do appreciate the journey. Oh my goodness. Well, Steve Down, you've absolutely survived your quickfire round. I'm very pleased to tell you have won my respect, and hopefully the respect of the listeners as well. So I would love for you just to quickly give us your advice for the world right now.
Oh, this is an interesting one. Advice for the world. I think being careful in how you approach each other. I think it's like, especially right now, I think like sometimes we need to kind of like stand in like what I can best describe as the compassionate middle. And I think I don't think I've kind of like viewed many conversations where like, you know, if there's two kind of diverging opinions where one person says, you know, if I've heard you right, or, you know, did I hear you right when you said this? And I think the assumption is always for some reason that, you know, the other person's wrong. And I think, you know, it really creates a safe or kind of like congenial space in public discourse. And I think if, you know, we were to be compassionate, you know, you'd give the speaker time to clarify or at least admit they'd communicated poorly, or to even reconsider, you know. And I think so. I think sometimes just kind of compassion, I think, you know, being in that compassionate middle, you know, and thinking, if I respond right now, how is it going to affect the situation? I think there's always like 3 things, which is like, you know, if you're going to say something, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Like, I think it's, you know, I think you have to kind of like take your thoughts captive and think carefully before you answer something. Very, very wise words, my lovely, lovely friend. Oh, it's been such a joy to speak to you today, and I hope that maybe we can catch up with you in a further 12 months when we're out and about and gigging again. Oh my goodness. I can't wait for that day. It's been so good. So if people want to listen to your music, where can they find you? What are your social handles? Steve Down Guitar is one that's on Instagram, and then my teaching stuff is on YouTube, which is Exeter Guitar Lessons, and that's where I'm doing like lots and lots of things. There's a Patreon that kind of goes along with that, so yeah, that's where they can find me. Excellent. I really, really encourage all my listeners out there to check out Steve's work, because he's utterly unbelievable. So, thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time out of your day to come on the show. It's been thanks, Kat. And this podcast's amazing. I've listened to like a load of them, and it's been so nice to listen to. Oh, thank you so much. Mutual Appreciation Society. There goes the ego again.
Steve has a brilliant mind, don't you think? Not only does his passion for guitar enable him to travel the world, but his mind enables him to truly see it on more than just a visual level. His thoughts and story, transcendence, inclusivity, and acceptance are universal indeed, but how often do we put these concepts into practice? Steve reminds us that we are more than just our own story. We have our story and the story to contemplate. From his fingertips, Steve consciously creates for those in audience with him, where for a time all are accepted, all are contributing to the overall energy expressed, and synergistically all are transcending the construct and constrict of social identity in favour of unity and connection. Something that Steve is aware of when he's playing, and one of the many reasons I suppose he enjoys his work. However much he enjoys playing, Steve has also come to understand that balance, like in any work, is crucial to his success. Saying no is as important, sometimes more so, than saying yes. Don't be scared of that, or worry that you may miss out on something. There will be more opportunity for those who cultivate self-care, family time, and the good old switch off. If you can show up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to a gig instead of exhausted or unfocused, you are instantly more employable and people can trust in you to give 100%. These things are a big part of the overall enjoyment of your one and precious life. In stillness, we recover, breathe, and receive new energy and those all-important new ideas. As for his personal practice, Steve thinks ahead and sets time aside each week for the things that he needs to learn or revisit. This enables him not to feel overwhelmed and allows his mind space. There can be more creative freedom found in the construct of routine than the chaos of impulse. It's important to cultivate time and space for our craft, so think about what you can do to create that slot of time in your life. One of the biggest things I hear when people are scared to pursue their dream is that they don't have the time, and yet they will happily make the time to watch TV, play on the phone, or go for a coffee. It doesn't need to be much. 15 minutes can make all the difference, and we can all find that if we truly wanted to. Finally, Steve reminds us that what we put out into the world really is on us. He asks us to consider our hearts, minds, and the tool in which both speak, our language. We all have control over our choices and responses to others every single day. Asking yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Is a compassionate way to conduct yourself in conversation and society in general. It is also a good compass for how you treat yourself within your own mind. If you constantly berate yourself, ask if what you're saying is true. Write down all the evidence that proves this thought to be correct, then ask if these thoughts are necessary or a good addition to how you carry yourself. And finally ask yourself if what you're saying is kind. If it isn't, imagine the thought on a piece of paper, screw it up into a tight ball, and then chuck it as far as the mind's eye can see. How we see ourselves is usually a good indicator of how we conduct our reactions to situations or others in public. And 9 times out of 10, it's down to a fear that we have about how we are seen or feel inadequate in some way. With practice, we can gain control over these thought errors with a combination of self-inquiry, affirmation, and body language. You can't feel bad about yourself if you purposefully smile, and you don't feel small if you stand with your hands on your hips with your chest puffed out. Sometimes, in order to train the mind, we have to retrain the body, and in doing so, we feel better about ourselves in the process. Try this exercise now. Stand in front of a mirror, close your eyes, and imagine yourself in a perfect scenario. This could be your first day at a new job, standing on a stage before a great gig, shaking hands with a new client, or even meeting someone you like for a date. Physically, stand proud, shoulders back and relaxed, chin up, beaming smile, arms open and receiving. Hold that thought, and now open your eyes. How does it feel to see yourself in a body that speaks your thoughts about yourself? You could try the reverse too. Imagine feeling sad. What happens to your body when you think with that energy? Now open your eyes and see the difference. How does your body show these feelings to you now? Self-acceptance and self-growth start within, and these important yet simple exercises are the key to changing how you feel in the world. It may also be why you haven't got the gig or the date. Our thoughts are our most powerful ally, and as Steve has told us, getting a hold on them is important, especially when all your friends are going in one direction and you're going in another. As Jacques Lacan once said, "I speak without knowing it. I speak with my body, and I do so unbeknownst to myself. Thus, I always say more than I know." So go out there and connect to the bigger story, to our story, and to your own. Chances are you have more to say than you realize, and have said for many years more than you know. So go on an adventure and see what you may find. Next week on the show, we speak to professional ballet dancer Megan Cameron on the thrills of performing in the prestigious Swan Lake, the demands put on a dancer's body, and how to love yourself when the world wants you to change. Now sit back and relax and listen to Steve's arrangement of Pat Metheny's Always and Forever. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show. If you have a spare moment now, please like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in a review on Apple Podcasts, which will really help other people like yourself to find the show. Of course, you can also share the show with your friends by following us at the Brave Moment Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or on Twitter at Moment Brave, or just follow the Linktree on all of our social media platforms. It's been so wonderful to have you all here with me again. Please get in touch with your own stories, and remember, your brave moment starts now.